Hey, have you ever felt like you have to get everything under control, but inside you're on the verge of falling apart? I feel you. This is Yujin. I'm a 32-year-old working professional. Today is November 2023, exactly 10 years since I first sat across from my therapist, Dr. Z. In this video, I will unpack the cost, the commitment, and the profound personal growth from a decade's worth of therapy. In 2012, I was a resident assistant at one of UC Berkeley's dorm. One of the residents committed suicide, and the RAs were assigned group therapy. Something inside me broke. I was the only one among my internship class not extended a return offer. I was still awake at 4, texting my mom who's in Korea. Mom, I'm sad. I can't fall asleep. Like, what's wrong with me? I must have looked like a mess because strangers offered to give me a hug. You know when you have those moments when you feel helpless and it's very small. That's where I was, but I didn't know what to do. Should I sign up for a cognitive behavioral therapy? I was not raised in the culture that openly talks about therapy. My dad wasn't happy that I was seeing a therapist. Actually, to this day, he says I don't need therapy. Yujin, why don't you talk to your friends or with me and pay me? Well, Dad, I can't talk so openly about my problems with you. Growing up in Korea, therapy whispered failure. The New York Times headline, "Stressed and depressed Koreans avoid therapy," echoed the sentiment that even seeking therapy felt like a personal attack on my character. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It was time to change my narrative. I had to make a choice, and one that would change everything. I walked into my therapy room. Dr. Z had a black clipboard, a pen, thick rimmed glasses, and short curly hair. Oh, she is Asian. After taking some basic questions to gauge my mental state, she then asked, "So Yujin, what brings you in today?" I painfully went through my memory of what's been building up inside me that week. I was expecting her to say, "So how does that make you feel?" But instead, she said something that got me completely hooked in therapy. Dr. Z had sparked a subtle yet profound shift in me. I was no longer hating myself for what happened. Instead, I was filling my time with things that would keep me energized and occupied. When I returned to the student health center, Dr. Z was gone. The front desk lady told me that Dr. Z moved her sessions to a dorm on Piedmont Avenue, which happened to be my address. I thought this was fate. Every Friday, I started a new Google Doc and dropped in points of incidents along with my thought process. I proudly presented my agenda to Dr. Z, not so secretly hoping that she would compliment me on my progress. Dr. Z was great at describing my alternative thoughts and painting a vivid picture of my alternate universe. What my life could have been had I given up my last year at Berkeley, had I continued to doubt myself when applying for that job, had I made compromises in my life because someone told me to. Just when I thought that I got really lucky finding a therapist, I learned that getting therapy comes with its own set of challenges. Once I graduated, there were 2 complications: time and money. While living in San Francisco, I took the BART to downtown Berkeley for our 8 p.m. sessions. This meant that I rarely went out on Fridays. When I relocated to Washington, D.C. and traveled to San Francisco for work, I met her on Sunday evenings after landing in SFO. Money was tricky. When I started working, I realized that Dr. Z is out of network, which meant that I had to pay the cost out of pocket. I still wanted to work with her, so I found various ways to cut down cost. I negotiated a discounted rate with Dr. Z, and I created a monthly expense report to check my financial health. I valued my mental health above anything else. 3 years into therapy, a new problem emerged. I started to not like what I was hearing from my therapist and from myself. The themes in my early 20s centered around, why do I feel unlovable? Why is it so hard to find someone? When I shared these thoughts with my friends, I heard reassuring, "Oh, Yujin, you will find someone." But surprisingly, my therapist hit me with a new reality. You may not find someone. Now, how do you feel about that? What do you mean? I thought you were supposed to be one of my biggest cheerleaders. Then again, Dr. Z is not my mother. In therapy, you get used to verbalizing your own thoughts. In the process, I was digging deeper into my flaws, my mistakes, and getting more disappointed at myself. During my therapy session, I actually remembered a childhood trauma that I set aside and forgot about, somewhat intentionally, for many years. Each session was a deeper dive into my thoughts, and it was becoming grueling. Every week, I felt that I needed to present my problems on a plate and say, "Here are my problems this week. Let's take a look." Each session was a reminder of how immature and embarrassing I was. You know, when you start doing that on a regular basis, it really starts to kind of weigh you down. By the 5th year of therapy, I was 27 and I told myself, it's time for a break. Dr. Z and I agreed on quarterly check-ins in 2019. You might think, good, Yujin, you finally grew up. Have you ever felt like you were finally on track, only to have a crisis throw everything off balance? That was me. COVID hit in March 2020. All of a sudden, we needed masks, food, supplies. Therapy was the last thing on my mind. In May 2020, I flew back to Seoul and I was hospitalized for 10 days. As I lay in the hospital bed with no date of discharge and no description of my illness, I started to worry. Will my life be different from now? This is also the point in my life when I start to think about death a lot. Once you become very sick, you begin to treasure even the small, boring moments in your life. You never worry about the importance of health until you are left in a position where you can't do anything. I will spare you the details, but I was instructed to live a different life. Stress-free, low impact, and slow. Everything that I wasn't before. Mom and dad insisted that I leave behind the life I was trying to build in the United States. Settled out in Korea. After all, it's home. Since college, I haven't lived in Korea for 10 years. So much has changed and I had a difficult time adjusting. I was too big in Korean beauty standards and even a large jean felt too tight. I just turned 30, but my life seemed bleak. There was nothing to look forward to. I went through my journals and was reminded how relieved I felt after my first session with Dr. Z. Should I stay in Korea? Am I chasing a non-existent American dream? Dr. Z guided me through the process. To quote Dr. Z, those who prepare for death make room for life. And that's true. The more you think about the legacy you want to leave behind, the more intentional you become with how you spend your time. I spent 11 months going through my therapy notes, my journals, asking myself what it is that I truly want in my life, both personally and professionally. This year, 2023, has been a year that I prioritize my mental health, physical health above anything else. Hence, which is why I always end my channel with stay healthy. And you'll get to know why as I share more stories about me. Do I think everyone should get therapy? There are many paths to healing: journaling, meditation, workshops, reading, even a good night's sleep. And therapy is just one of many. I also understand that getting therapy is a privilege. Carving out a big chunk of your day, finding a qualified therapist, and being in a community where there's less stigma around seeking mental health support are all challenges you may face. Do you know that nobody but yourself can save you? I've come a long way from the girl who randomly broke down on the streets of Buckley to who I am today. I got in the habit of preparing for the worst and hoping for the best through therapy. Now I have a better guide on how I will act. Not invited to an event? That's okay. Maybe next time. You get comfortable in your own skin and maybe you care a little less. I now have hundreds of therapy notes and highlights that I can lean on when I feel lost, anxious, depressed, or all of the above. There are still days that I cry. Yeah, but it's not a tear of defeat because whatever happens, I have the grit to make it through. Our stories may be different, but the journey of self-discovery is a road that we all walk. You know yourself best and where you are in life. And my next video topic is... Let's go! It's time to be the GOAT! It's time to enter God mode, man, let's get it going! I wanna be the greatest, energy is overflowing. I know I'm stoking the fire, my desire's taking over,